Even Macs get malware every now and then. The new Silver Sparrow malware has left cybersecurity researchers puzzled.
So, John, tell us about the new malware with the Silver Sparrow.
Sure. Yeah. So there's a report that came out, within the past few days here from a group called Red Canary. They're kind of a malware research group. And they discovered this kind of interesting piece of macOS malware that they're not quite sure what it's for yet, but they have discovered that there's probably about 30,000 devices infected with this malware. So just to give you some details on how this one works, basically what they discovered that on the Mac OS, they're not quite sure how it gets delivered to the victims yet, but installed on the system is a piece of malware. It's distributed as a .package file, which is pretty typical for Apple. And they found two versions of it. One that's a legacy Intel x86 version for the Mac, and another binary that has both the x86 and the M1 ARM64 processor, which is a really new processor. It was only released back in November of last year, so only a few months ago, which is kind of interesting that they've already compiled a custom version just for that processor. So right now, they don't know what the ultimate goal of this malware is. It does do a check-in about once an hour. Like I said, there's about 30,000 or so machines that they can see are compromised with it. There's a couple of other interesting aspects of it. They use Amazon AWS S3 buckets as well as Akamai CDN for as part of their infrastructure. So whoever kind of developed this probably has a really good knowledge of cloud infrastructure. And the other benefit of doing that is that it really blends in well with legitimate traffic. So the check-in URLs that this malware will check into once an hour are actually Amazon S3 buckets. So I'll just verbally read them. I recommend you check the link out for the Red Canary report that we'll probably be showing on the screen here to get the full details. But it'll try to reach out to two specific URLs that are Amazon S3 buckets. So it's specialattributes.s3.amazonaws.com, and then another one, mobiletraits.s3.amazonaws.com. So us as analysts, a lot of times when we see these things, when we see Amazon buckets, a lot of times you kind of just tune it out because it kind of goes into the background noise. But these are specific ones that you'd want to pay attention to because they are indicators of compromise. And I can tell you that, we started looking at this within the past few days, actually, I guess yesterday, and we're able to see that there are a couple of victims out there for sure that we have some visibility into, reaching out to these S3 buckets. So in your enterprises, I would highly recommend that you go take a look for any activity of that nature. The Red Canary report has a lot more detail about other indicators, especially if you have some endpoint solutions that you can look for certain processes running, like curl, reaching out to these. That would be even a stronger indicator. So I would take a look at that. And hopefully, I guess the other thing to mention, right now they don't know what it's for. They've been watching it for about a week or two now, and so far they haven't seen any payloads delivered during any of the check-ins. So they don't know, what the intent is. Usually when somebody has a botnet, they're usually giving instructions to all their bots on some basis, regular basis usually. But right now, during the period of time that they've been aware of it and they've been watching the command and control, they haven't seen any. That's the researchers who haven't seen any actual payloads delivered or instructions delivered to the bots. So one to keep an eye out for, and macOS's malware is relatively rarer than most. So an interesting one to kind of take a look at in your enterprises and see if you have any machines that need to get remediated.
So with AWS S3 buckets, I know for a fact that currently, you're able to get to it via HTTPS over the internet, but we've been waiting on AWS to make an advance on creating the S3 buckets to be accessed via an internal IP so that you can use a tunnel to get to those S3 buckets. But right now they're only used for a gateway interface and or Lambda functions for the AWS S3 buckets. But I'm curious to see when AWS will come out with the interface so that you can get to them via an IP internally to send traffic through it rather than going over the internet to make it more secure.
Right. Yeah. In these cases, they're definitely, targeting people that are internet facing. So all of these buckets are internet facing, and that's how they're delivering the instruction sets to them. So it's also a JSON blob that they send back to you instruction-wise that, once you read the article, you can take a look at it and see what it looks like if you're interested in the malware analysis aspect of it.
I thought it was interesting. I think it was in the article, it said that some of the binaries, depending on which version you get, will either, if you run it to completion, brings up a hello world or a you did it prompt. Right. And it seemed like the researchers weren't yet sure, is this a placeholder? Is this maybe a red herring for us to look down? Or I guess because it's so new and there's not a lot known about any purpose because I guess the timing, they haven't been able to find that kind of attribution yet. But it's interesting that it almost feels incomplete in a way with the hello world to see that already.
Right. Almost like it's a test stub of some sort. And yeah, you're right. And little is known about its true intent because they haven't actually seen it deliver any instructions. So it's interesting, but for 30,000 devices to be infected with it, across a widespread population, from what I'm observing, I suspect, I don't have any evidence to this, but I suspect that it was probably delivered through like malvertising. Probably somehow it was, you visited a web page and it tried to just push this package to you in an advertising stream. They probably inserted malware through the advertising channels. That's my guess. I have no evidence of that, so don't quote me on it. But in order for it to get a distribution like it has, one other thing I forgot to mention is there is some stub code in there that has a self-removal function. So they can send an instruction that says, delete yourself. Just delete the malware that's installed on the machine, not anything else with the machine. So it's not like ransomware or anything. So that's also an interesting aspect that it was created and it has a self-removal feature, which is not typically something you see very often in malware. They usually have a self-reinfection mechanism. So,
yeah, it's almost anyway. It's almost like covering your tracks. Like even if they did do something, now they say, "Oh, I don't want to be found. Delete the infecting bit or something."
But it's constantly calling home, right? That malware is constantly calling home, right?
Right. Once an hour, it goes to get any new instructions, but they've never seen the instructions to say, go do something. It always just says, just nothing to do right now. So I guess we'll have to wait and see if if it actually becomes alive. Now that there's a lot of attention on it, whoever developed it might be smart to just kind of let it go away. That would be my advice if I was the bad guy. But I guess we'll see what happens. Maybe the researchers will discover a little more.